In this business of trading, most people fail not because the market defeats them, but because they never learn how to think in probabilities or how to align their mindset with the nature of the market. They believe trading is about picking tops and bottoms or chasing every price tick as if certainty exists somewhere out there. But certainty doesn't exist. That's not trading. That's attempting to control the uncontrollable. And today we're going to talk about how to build a mindset that aligns with the market's truth, how to become the kind of trader who understands the probabilistic nature of every outcome, who knows when to engage, when to stand aside, and when to allow the market to unfold without interference. You might remember in the previous video on how fear destroys good trades, we talked about how emotion transforms clarity into chaos. Well, those same emotions distort your perception of probabilities more than anything else. A mind clouded by fear or hope can't see the market objectively, can't recognize what the environment is offering, and can't execute when it's time to act. So before we can talk about sharpening your trading edge, we've got to talk about discipline, not as restriction, but as the structure that keeps your thinking aligned with the market's uncertainty. Discipline is the foundation for consistent thinking. Now let me tell you something fundamental to Mark Douglas's teachings. The market is always neutral. It doesn't generate winners or losers. Only your beliefs do. Think about that. How many times have you projected certainty onto a trade? How many times have you held a losing position because you believed the market should behave a certain way? That's the illusion of control right there. When you stop accepting the randomness of individual outcomes and start clinging to your own internal narrative, you've already lost. The consistent trader listens to the market's behavior rather than his own expectations, responds to probabilities instead of predictions, and takes action without hesitation when his predefined edge appears. Do you know what most traders do instead? They overload their screens with indicators and signals because they don't trust their ability to see the market as a stream of opportunities rather than threats. They're looking for confirmation of certainty, something Mark Douglas warned against. Price is simply the market expressing a collective belief at a moment in time. You can add indicators if it comforts you, but at the end of the day, your real edge lies in your ability to think probabilistically and interpret what the market is offering without emotional distortion. That requires patience. It requires practice. It requires embracing losses as natural, not personal. Now ask yourself this. Do you truly understand your own methodology? Or are you still searching for a strategy that eliminates discomfort? Because here's the truth. An edge isn't a guarantee. It's a statistical advantage that only reveals itself over a series of trades. It's something you internalize, built through your beliefs, your emotional stability, your ability to execute without hesitation. The market rewards traders who operate without fear, without expectation, and without the need to be right. If you don't know exactly what defines your edge, then you're not trading. You're gambling with illusions of control. Every consistently successful trader I've ever known understood this. Your edge comes from consistency, not prediction. You don't need to trade every setup or anticipate every movement. You simply align yourself with the patterns that resonate with your beliefs and accept that the outcome of each individual trade is uncertain. Most traders blow up because they try to force the market to behave according to their expectations. They confuse activity with skill. They forget that trading isn't about action. It's about responding to opportunity when your edge appears. When the market presents a high probability moment, you execute with confidence, not because you know what will happen, but because you accept that whatever happens is part of the game. And yes, it takes time. More time than most people are willing to allow. But tell me, what form of mastery doesn't require time? Would you trust a pilot or surgeon who avoided practice? Then why should the market reward someone who refuses to build mental mastery? A trader's success doesn't come from luck. It comes from the ability to think in probabilities with unwavering discipline. Real growth is forged not in comfort, but in repeated exposure to uncertainty, until uncertainty no longer feels threatening. When I was learning the game, I used to document every error, every hesitation, every emotional impulse. I'd ask myself whether the issue was the market or my own thinking. And more often than not, it was me. The edge doesn't diminish because of the market. It diminishes because your mindset drifts away from objectivity. The only way to maintain a sharp edge is to study your mental framework more carefully than any chart. You remember how in that last talk about fear destroying good trades, I told you fear never disappears, you simply learn to neutralize it. The same principle applies here. Sharpening your edge doesn't remove risk. It aligns your mind with it. The sharper your mindset, the cleaner your execution. But that also means higher levels of psychological precision. A trader with a dull mindset hacks away at the market. A trader with a refined mindset interacts with it. And you don't develop that mindset by watching others. You develop it through exposure, reflection, and repetition. Trade small. Observe your emotional responses. Learn. Iterate. That's how you build the inner architecture of a consistent performer. Here's a question. When you sit in front of the screen in the morning, do you recognize the type of market environment you're in? Trending, ranging, rotating, choppy? Because your edge depends on perceiving the market without bias. The market doesn't provide opportunities on command. Some days, the highest probability trade is no trade at all. But most traders lose their edge on those days because they can't sit still. They forget that doing nothing is a conscious decision rooted in discipline. A consistent trader knows that patience isn't passive. It's part of his edge. Too many traders try to impose their expectations on the market instead of aligning with what's actually there. You can't force the market to validate your beliefs. You can only accept what the market offers. That's why Mark Douglas emphasized that market analysis is subjective, because you're interpreting an environment that has no inherent structure until you assign meaning to it. You learn to sense shifts not by prediction, but by familiarity. And when your edge appears, you execute without hesitation, because you've trained your mind to detach from the need to be right. Every market has a rhythm, a psychological flow. Your job is to acclimate yourself to that flow, to decode its behavior without emotional interference. Some traders do it through momentum, others through structure, others through levels. But regardless of style, your edge sharpens when the process becomes second nature. You stop needing certainty. You start embracing probabilities. One of the most dangerous things that can happen to a trader is not a loss. It's a win created by luck. Because that win reinforces the illusion of control and blinds you to the flaws in your thinking. The market eventually exposes every illusion. I've lived it. Every trader who survives long enough has lived it. The only way to maintain a real edge is to test it across changing conditions to verify that your mindset remains aligned with uncertainty. If it holds, good. If it slips, you adjust and rebuild. In trading, the sharpest edge is not the one that cuts the market. It's the one that cuts through your illusions. Every moment of greed, fear, or overconfidence dulls that edge. Each moment of neutrality, patience, and disciplined execution sharpens it. The market rewards emotional balance, not emotional reaction. So ask yourself right now, is your mindset more disciplined than it was 6 months ago? Or have you been repeating the same emotional habits, expecting different results? That's the dividing line between the inconsistent trader and the consistently profitable one. Your edge is earned through mental alignment, not through discovery. Most traders come into the market searching for certainty, a holy grail that removes discomfort. They look for an indicator or system that guarantees an outcome in an environment defined by uncertainty. But the edge isn't in a tool. It's in your ability to execute with consistency regardless of outcome. The market rewards preparation, not hope. When I first started trading, I thought the secret was in the system. I jumped from strategy to strategy, thinking the next one would eliminate risk or remove losses. Every new method seemed like the answer, until it wasn't. Eventually, I realized that the system wasn't the problem. I was the constant variable. The edge was in how I thought, not what I used. Discipline may not sound exciting, but it's the only thing that transforms a method into a tool of consistency. Without discipline, even the best approach becomes meaningless. Discipline keeps you from impulsive trades when the environment isn't offering anything. It stops you from averaging down because you fear being wrong. It reminds you that being flat is a valid position, often the strongest. The truth is, most traders already have enough technical knowledge to succeed. What they lack is the discipline to apply it consistently. They break their rules. They rationalize bad decisions. They chase emotional relief instead of probabilistic execution. And every time they deviate, they dull their edge. The market doesn't punish them immediately. Sometimes it rewards the mistake. That's the danger. A mistake rewarded is a belief reinforced. Then one day, the same behavior wipes out weeks of gains, and they realize their so-called edge was nothing but emotional impulsiveness disguised as skill. Traders who endure understand that discipline isn't confinement, it's protection. It shields you from your own cognitive distortions. The disciplined trader waits for alignment, setup, context, risk parameters. If it appears, he acts. If it doesn't, he waits without frustration. This type of psychological restraint is rare, but it's what forms an edge durable enough to survive market uncertainty. In the earlier talk about fear destroying trades, we discussed how fear stems from uncertainty. Discipline neutralizes fear by giving you structure, a predefined framework within which to operate. Structure creates confidence. Not arrogance, confidence built through consistent execution. A disciplined trader doesn't react to random price flickers. He accepts that fluctuations exist to shake out the undisciplined. He understands that most traders can't tolerate stillness, so they overtrade and overinterpret. But he has seen enough to know that time rewards the patient. So he waits, not passively, but consciously. The essence of discipline is restraint. And restraint in trading is as valuable as timing itself. Every losing streak challenges your discipline. Every winning streak tempts you to abandon it. That's the paradox. Success can be more dangerous than failure if it loosens your structure. A few wins, and suddenly you skip steps, increase size, loosen stops. The market hands you rope, and if you're not grounded, you'll use it against yourself. A real trader keeps his process airtight, regardless of the outcome. Win or lose, the plan stays intact. Discipline is also emotional. Neutrality. The market doesn't care how you feel, so your trades can't be based on feelings. You can't let excitement distort your judgment, nor can you allow fear to paralyze you. Each action must come from a neutral state. That's why journaling, reviewing, and reflection matter. They're not chores, they're tools of awareness. They expose your biases and emotional patterns, allowing you to transform them. Some traders think discipline means rigidity. It doesn't. It means consistency. You can evolve your methodology as the market evolves, but your discipline, your process, your risk respect, your neutrality remains unchanged. The market will shift. Your psychology must remain balanced enough to adapt. Because in the end, it's not the strategy that keeps you profitable. It's the mindset behind it. So when you think about your trading edge, stop searching for a perfect system. The secret isn't external, it's internal. Most traders already know what to do. They just lack the discipline to do it consistently. They chase complexity because facing their own inconsistency is more uncomfortable. But the trader who masters himself doesn't need more tools. He needs deeper awareness, stronger emotional control, and the inner calm that no indicator can measure. Markets reward discipline because discipline builds reliability, and reliability creates confidence. Not confidence in the market, but confidence in yourself. Emotional control prevents your edge from dulling under pressure, and pressure is always there. The market tests your patience, tempts you with quick gains, scares you with sudden moves, and confuses you with conflicting signals. How you respond defines everything. The market doesn't defeat traders through price. It defeats them through emotion. Every tick triggers hope, fear, greed, or doubt. If you can't manage those emotions, your edge disappears faster than any technical loss. A trader without emotional control is like a soldier without training, dangerous to himself. You can have the most sophisticated system in the world. But if your emotions take over when money is on the line, the system collapses. How many times have you watched the trade go against you and held on out of hope? How many times have you exited too early because you couldn't tolerate watching profits fluctuate? Those actions aren't about the markets, they're about emotional discomfort. And every one of them dulls your edge. You can't remove emotion, but you can master how it influences you. The market reflects your inner world. And until you master that world, consistency remains out of reach. It doesn't matter how confident you feel when you're flat. The real test comes when you're in a position and the market moves against you. That's when uncertainty starts whispering in your ear. That's when your pulse rises and your mind begins searching for reasons to justify avoiding discomfort. The disciplined trader recognizes that inner voice for what it is, fear of uncertainty, and lets it pass. The emotional trader listens to it, reacts to it, and pays for it. You remember in that earlier video on how fear destroys good trades, we talked about how fear shifts a trader out of a probabilistic mindset and into survival mode. The exact same principle applies here. Emotional control is the psychological shield that protects your ability to think in probabilities. When fear takes over, rational thought collapses. You stop trading the market's behavior and start trading the story your emotions are telling you. You move stops, chase entries, and analyze every tick through the lens of discomfort. The chart becomes a reflection of your anxiety instead of a flow of neutral information. But when you maintain emotional balance, you read the chart for what it is, not what you hope or fear it might be. Trading at its foundation is a game of probabilities. The outcome of any single trade means nothing. Only the cumulative effect of disciplined, neutral decisions matters. But emotions distort that. One losing trade can feel like personal failure. One winning trade can feel like validation. And before long, your self-worth becomes tied to your P&L. That's when you're finished. Because once you take trades personally, you lose the ability to remain objective. You begin seeing the market as an adversary instead of a neutral environment. You start trying to prove you're right instead of allowing yourself to be wrong gracefully. That's not trading. That's ego trying to control uncertainty. And ego dulls every edge you've developed. Ask yourself, how often do you review your trades without emotion? Can you look at a losing trade and say, I followed my plan? That is a good trade, even if it cost you money, because that demonstrates emotional neutrality, the ability to separate the outcome from the process. A trader who lacks emotional control can't do this. He judges success by outcome alone, and because of that, he never improves the quality of his decisions. The market becomes a roller coaster of emotional highs and lows, with every loss feeling like an attack. Traders who master their emotions understand that control isn't about shutting feelings off. It's about remaining centered. They feel fear and greed like everyone else, but they don't act on them. They've trained themselves to pause, breathe, and verify before they execute. That brief pause, that single moment of awareness, is what protects their edge, because that's the very moment most traders lose theirs. Emotional control also comes from preparation. When you know your plan, when you've rehearsed your scenarios and defined your exits, the market's randomness can't shake you as easily. It's like a pilot flying through turbulence. The plane may shake, the wind may shift, but the pilot stays composed because he trusts his training and his instruments. He doesn't panic because he understands the environment and his role within it. A trader must do the same. Your instruments are your rules, your risk limits, your predefined setups. Trust them. Don't abandon them the moment discomfort arises. That's exactly when you need them most. There's another psychological trap: overconfidence. Just as fear dulls your edge, so does the illusion of invincibility disguised as confidence. You win a few trades, feel untouchable, and suddenly discipline fades. You increase size, skip steps, relax your criteria. The market might reward you once or twice, and then it blindsides you. Overconfidence blinds you to probability, and risk ignored accumulates silently until it explodes. Emotional control keeps arrogance in check. It reminds you that one good trade doesn't make you skilled, just as one loss doesn't make you incompetent. It's the long run that matters, the series of balanced, disciplined choices. A sharp trader treats his emotions like passing weather. He knows emotional storms come and go, but they don't change the principles he operates by. He doesn't try to avoid emotions. He prepares for them, because he understands the real battle isn't with the market. It's with his own impulses. Every trade is a test of patience, clarity, and restraint. The traders who pass that test consistently, those are the ones who last. The market's pressure never stops. It doesn't care about your goals, your comfort, or your plans. Prices will swing, setups will fail, and news will jolt expectations. You can't control any of that. The only thing you can control is how you respond. Emotional control isn't the ability to stay calm when things are easy. It's the ability to maintain composure when everything moves against you. When fear says, get out now, but your plan says, hold. When greed says, double down, but logic says, take the profit. Those are the moments that define your edge. Emotional strength also shows up in your willingness to accept uncertainty. The best traders live comfortably with not knowing. They don't need to predict. They accept that the market's job is to confuse, and their job is to remain clear-headed inside that confusion. That clarity, that ability to detach from outcome, is what allows them to see opportunity where others see chaos. Emotion blurs perception. Control sharpens it. A true edge survives evolving market conditions. Most traders think their edge is a permanent formula, a pattern, setup, or signal that will work forever. They treat the market like a static machine instead of a dynamic environment. But markets evolve. They shift in tone, rhythm, participation, and behavior. What worked in one phase stops working in the next. Liquidity changes. Volatility expands or contracts. Correlations break. Traders who fail are the ones who refuse to adapt. Traders who survive understand that their edge must be flexible enough to adjust, yet structured enough to remain consistent. Every bull market produces a new wave of overconfident traders. They make money easily, mistake randomness for skill, and start believing their method is infallible. Then conditions shift. Breakouts fail, reversals trap, volatility widens, and suddenly the system that once seemed flawless starts bleeding. These traders blame manipulation, algorithms, liquidity, anything but themselves. But the truth is simple. Their edge was never real. It was a temporary advantage shaped by favorable conditions. A real edge, the kind that endures, is built on understanding how to recognize changing conditions early and adjust before the market forces painful lessons. Ask yourself, how often do you step back and evaluate whether your strategies match the current market personality? Do you trade the same way in a slow, grinding environment as you do in a fast, volatile one? Because if you don't adjust your expectations, your risk, and your pace, the market will teach you to. There is no single formula that works in every environment. What matters is how quickly you recognize when your edge is fading and how calmly you refine it without emotional collapse. In my own experience, the market shifts like seasons. Some periods reward momentum. Others punish it. There are seasons when breakouts explode and seasons when every breakout becomes a trap. A trader with a true edge doesn't cling rigidly to one approach. He observes. He senses the shift. He adapts. He may reduce size, adjust timing, or require stronger confirmation. He understands that preservation of capital is part of the edge. The inexperienced keep trading the same way, hoping the market will return to a familiar rhythm. But normal doesn't exist. There is only the present. And the present is always changing. You might remember from that earlier video on how fear destroys good trades. Fear comes from losing control, from not knowing how to react when conditions change. The same principle applies here. When a trader's edge stops working and he refuses to adapt, uncertainty leaks into his thinking. Every trade starts to feel unstable because deep down he knows his confidence was built on a rigid belief rather than a probabilistic mindset. But when your edge is built on adaptability, when it's rooted in awareness, flexibility, and continuous learning, fear loosens its grip. Because instead of trying to control the market, you learn to flow with it. Adaptation doesn't mean abandoning who you are as a trader. It means refining your execution while staying aligned with your core principles. Your edge might come from trend trading, swing trading, or mean reversion. But within that structure, there's space for evolution. For example, a trend trader who can't perceive when momentum is weakening will give back profits every time conditions shift into consolidation. A swing trader who refuses to adjust size when volatility spikes will get emotionally shaken out of trades that were otherwise valid. A true professional observes these transitions. He adjusts tools, timing, and expectations without abandoning his foundation. That's what makes his edge resilient. You can think of it like a sailor who learns to navigate the sea in all forms. The ocean doesn't change for him. It simply expresses different states, sometimes calm, sometimes violent, sometimes deceptive. He can't control the sea, but he can control his sail, his positioning, and his patience. That's how he survives. The trader's job is no different. The markets are the sea. Your method is the sail, and your edge is the ability to keep that sail balanced when others tip over. Another part of maintaining an edge through changing conditions is observation. Too many traders stop studying once they make money. They think they've solved the puzzle. But the markets humble anyone who becomes complacent. Every few years, something shifts. Liquidity, macro conditions, technology, behavior. The traders who endure are the ones who remain students forever. They don't assume. They test, verify, and evolve. They notice subtle shifts, how volume reacts at key levels, how leaders rotate, how crowd behavior changes around catalysts. Those little observations become the foundation of a durable edge. It's also about mental flexibility. You can't adapt if your ego is in charge. Ego makes you cling to outdated beliefs long after their usefulness has expired. The market doesn't care how long something worked before. It only cares about what works now. So the trader who can say, "My edge isn't performing, I need to reassess," will survive. The trader who insists the market is wrong will eventually disappear. Adaptability is a form of humility, a quiet recognition that the environment is bigger than you. That humility keeps you in the game when others burn out. Some traders confuse adaptation with constant strategy hopping, but that's not true adaptation. You don't abandon your system every time you hit a drawdown. You study the data, you determine whether the drawdown is normal, statistical variance, or evidence of a shift in conditions. Only then do you adjust. The amateur panics and chases new systems. The professional refines and recalibrates until his approach syncs with the current environment again. Think about how many times you've seen the market behave differently. Maybe volatility expands after years of calm, or new sectors suddenly lead while old leaders lag. In those moments, most traders freeze because their method wasn't built with adaptability in mind. The few who thrive are those who expect change. They've built flexibility into their process, a willingness to pause, observe, and strike only when new patterns reveal themselves. That's how their edge stays alive through cycles. The strongest edges are not mechanical, they're behavioral. They rely not on prediction, but on perception. The trader who learns to read behavior, price, volume, crowd reaction, develops an edge no algorithm can easily duplicate. Human behavior drives markets, regardless of technological evolution. When you understand that and remain attuned to how behavior shifts under new conditions, your edge evolves naturally with the market. In the end, your goal isn't to find an edge that never changes. It's to become a trader capable of reshaping, refining, and reapplying that edge in any environment. Markets will always rotate between phases of calm and chaos, optimism and fear. Observation and repetition refine instinct more than theory ever will. You can study every book, attend every seminar, memorize every rule, but until you've observed real-time markets with your own eyes, until you've seen how price responds to stress, none of it becomes real. The market doesn't reward those who recite theory. It rewards those who perceive the environment and act with clarity. That kind of instinct isn't built on knowledge alone. It's forged through observation and repetition. Most new traders want shortcuts. They want certainty, formulas, and checklists to eliminate doubt. But the market doesn't function as a simple equation. It moves on behavior, the ebb and flow of human psychology. And that can't be captured fully in rules. You develop an edge not by memorizing what others teach, but by watching what the market actually does. Every chart, every swing, every pullback tells a story. If you watch closely enough, patterns emerge that no textbook can offer. How volume swells before expansion. How price hesitates around psychological levels. How false moves trap traders moments before the real move begins. Those are lessons learned only through exposure. Observation is where instinct begins. You start seeing cause and effect unfold. You understand how one event precedes another, not because someone explained it, because you've witnessed it countless times. You may not articulate it immediately, but you can feel it. That feeling isn't mysticism. It's accumulated data filtered through attention. It's intuition born from experience rather than prediction. Ask yourself, how much time do you spend studying your own trades versus studying someone else's strategy? Because your edge is hidden inside your own experiences. Every win, every loss, every hesitation is feedback directly from the market. The more you observe your own behavior, interacting with price, the sharper your instinct becomes. Traders who rely solely on external advice never develop this internal compass. They stay dependent on opinions and become perpetually uncertain. The traders who have watched the tape long enough don't need to ask. They already know because they've seen the same behavior play out hundreds of times. Repetition builds confidence where theory cannot. You don't gain conviction by hearing a pattern works. You gain conviction by trading it again and again, seeing it succeed and fail under changing conditions. Each repetition engraves the lesson deeper. You trust the process because it's been lived, not imagined. That's why real traders resemble craftsmen. Mastery is built through repetition, not invention. You cannot simulate that experience, you can only accumulate it. You might remember from that earlier discussion on how fear destroys good trades. Fear comes from uncertainty, from not knowing how you'll respond or what the market will do. Observation and repetition eliminate much of that uncertainty. When you've seen a pattern unfold 100 times, you're no longer intimidated by it. You recognize the rhythm, the false starts, the hesitation, the genuine expansion. The more familiar the situation becomes, the more calmly you respond. Fear fades because familiarity replaces it. Practice is the antidote to emotion. Repetition also exposes your habits. You start seeing your own recurring errors, cutting winners prematurely, chasing late entries, hesitating on valid signals. You don't see it once. You see it dozens of times until the pattern becomes undeniable. That's when real improvement begins. Most traders never reach that point because they never stick with one framework long enough to observe themselves. They switch approaches before they can see their own behavioral patterns. But the trader who commits long enough to observe his strengths and weaknesses evolves because he sees himself clearly. The market rewards the trader who treats it as a teacher, not a lottery. Observation turns every session into a lesson and every chart into a classroom. When you miss a trade, you study why. When you take a loss, you ask what shifted. Over time, this cycle sharpens instinct until execution becomes automatic. You stop second-guessing because your mind has absorbed the rhythm. You act with clarity instead of impulse. Some call it intuition. But intuition in trading is not guessing, it's recognition. It's your subconscious processing patterns faster than your conscious mind can explain them. But that only works if you fed your mind enough meaningful data through repetition. You cannot develop instinct by reading charts or backtesting alone. You must experience live markets, the noise, the traps, the shifting sentiment. That's where intuition is built. Observation also teaches patience. When you've spent enough time watching markets move, you understand that opportunities come in cycles. You stop forcing trades because you've seen the consequences. You start waiting for alignment, structure, volume, context, and only then do you execute. That patience isn't passive, it's informed. You've seen the movie many times, and you know when the real scene begins. Repetition reinforces discipline. Every time you follow your rules instead of emotion, you strengthen the neural pathway that supports your composure. Eventually, discipline isn't effort. It becomes habit. You don't need to force yourself to do the right thing. You simply do it. Because repetition has made it second nature. Observation without repetition is theory. Repetition without observation is thoughtless routine. The two must merge. Observation sharpens perception. Repetition ingrains behavior. You watch, you act, you review, you repeat, until your reactions become fluid rather than forced. That's how a trader moves from mechanical execution to intuitive precision. Every great trader I've met could tell stories of spending hours watching the tape. Without trading, just watching. They weren't wasting time. They were learning the market's language. Each movement meant something, and eventually the language became familiar. When they finally traded, nothing surprised them. The market spoke and they understood. The trader who watches intently, records what he sees, trades deliberately, and reviews thoughtfully develops an edge that others cannot copy. Because that edge isn't written anywhere, it lives inside his instincts. It's the quiet understanding of how the market breathes, when it hesitates, when it presses, when it traps. And the thing about instinct, the kind created through observation and repetition, is that it doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't come from excitement or sudden flashes of brilliance. It comes from countless moments where your attention catches something others ignore. A subtle shift in order flow, a hesitation near a breakout, a pattern that feels slightly out of rhythm. You can't always explain it, but your internal compass knows. That's the trader's sixth sense, and it's earned one repetition at a time. The market rewards consistency, and consistency is a product of repetition. You cannot expect to trade well if you only engage when it's convenient. The trader who shows up daily, who watches even during slow conditions, who studies both the volatility and the dullness, becomes attuned to the market's habits. He can sense when something feels normal and when something feels off, and that familiarity becomes his internal navigation. You can't get that from theory. You get it from presence across many market cycles. Observation also builds humility. The more you study the market, the more you recognize your limitations. You shift from trying to predict to learning how to respond. You replace the need for certainty with a trust in probabilities. You stop believing you need perfect knowledge before acting. Instead, you respond to the evidence in front of you. Every moment spent observing without imposing expectations sharpens your perception. Every time you let the market reveal itself before you act, You strengthen your patience. That patience becomes part of your edge. There's something else repetition gives you. Rhythm. Every market has a tempo, an underlying pulse, that most traders never perceive because they're too busy forcing trades. But after enough exposure, the rhythm becomes clear. You begin sensing when energy builds, when it dissipates, when it's preparing to break. You learn when to press your advantage and when to stay still. That rhythm separates intuitive traders from mechanical ones. It's not mystical. It's the byproduct of long-term observation. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sat with your charts simply to observe, without the impulse to trade? When was the last time you studied the market as a student rather than a participant? Because observation without the urgency to act sharpens the mind. Most traders lack the patience for that. They want profit, not understanding. But profit follows understanding, not the other way around. The best setups rarely appear suddenly. They reveal themselves slowly to the trained eye that knows what precursors to look for. Repetition also builds resilience. When you've executed your strategy hundreds of times, normal losses no longer shake you. They're expected. Each trade becomes part of a series rather than an emotional event. That perspective is born through repetition. It anchors your psychology when volatility rises. Because instinct isn't just about finding opportunity. It's about staying composed when chaos hits. And as months and years pass, your refinements become more subtle. In the beginning, traders change broad elements, indicators, entries, targets. But with experience, the refinements shift into timing nuances, contextual awareness, the feel of the tape. You start trimming away everything unnecessary. Mastery hides in these subtle shifts, not in doing more, but in perceiving more. Over the years, I've seen traders heavily armed with theory disappear from the game. They knew every indicator and every model, but they couldn't navigate live uncertainty. Then I've seen traders with no formal education who had remarkable feel for the market. They weren't guessing, they were reading. They'd spent thousands of hours absorbing the tape. They recognized tonal changes instantly. That wasn't luck. That was repetition and observation solidifying into instinct. You can't fake that knowledge. You can't borrow it. You can't shortcut it. It's earned through time, through mistakes studied, through hours observed, through discipline practiced until natural. Observation and repetition transform uncertainty into familiarity, chaos into structure, and reaction into precision.